To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to reap, a time to break down and a time to build up and a time to heal, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. With those words, I welcome you to another edition of Voices on the Green, a time when we can listen to one another and learn. This is especially important given we find ourselves in a time when many don't want to listen or learn. But as a mentor of mine said to me, everyone has a teachable moment. We just need to find the right time. Timing is everything. Timing is everything is the theme for this evening. Perhaps you will weep. Perhaps you will laugh. Perhaps you will mourn. Perhaps you will dance. We bring together storytelling, speaking on topics which are important to our day, and music, all so we can be in community with each other. Tonight, our music will be provided by three really fine musicians and really good guys who I've had the pleasure of performing with. People of the Green, will you please welcome on guitar, Chuck Clow. On piano, Ronnie Hirschberg. And on lead guitar, Lexington's very own, by way of Dublin, Mr. Dave Moore.
Lying in my bed, I hear the clock tick and I think of you, caught up in circles. Confusion is nothing new. Flashbacks, warm nights, almost left behind. The second hand on one. Sometimes you picture me, I'm walking too far ahead. You're calling to me, and I can't hear what you've said. You say, go slow, I fall behind. The second hand unwinds. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. time after time. If you fall, I will catch you, I'll be waiting, time after time. After my picture fades, darkness has turned to gray. I'm watching through windows, I'm wondering if I'm okay. Secrets stolen from deep inside, the drum beats out of time. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me, time after time. If you fall, I will catch you, I'll be waiting, time after time. If you're lost, I will catch you, you will find me, time after time. If you fall, I will catch you, I will be waiting, time after time. You say, go slow, I fall behind. The second hand unwinds. If you're lost in the world, then you will find me.
Whoops, sorry.
Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you, I'll be waiting, time after time. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me, time after time. If you fall, I will catch you, I will be waiting, time after time, time after time, time after time, time after time, time after time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sometimes the meaning of things depends entirely on their timing. And sometimes the timing is just right. Sometimes it's not so right. Our first storyteller starts us off on a story where the timing was definitely wrong. Ache Galevale is a 14-year resident of Lexington. He's performed on WGBH's nationally broadcast Stories on Stage. He says he enjoys telling stories so much that he'd like to become a politician or a con artist, or both, which clearly there seems to be room. So if you will, please welcome our first storyteller up for the night. First on our stage, Ache Galevale.
It was December 21st, 2006. I had to catch up an early morning flight at Logan. I hate early morning flights. And like every early morning flight, I haven't slept night before. I reached the airport and found out my flight is 3 hours late. I went to a nearby Dunkin' Donuts, gulped a cup of coffee. I was still half asleep. I was kind of a zombie. I went to the security line, just following the ritual, okay, just going there and then following these things. And I put my bag onto the conveyor belt, and then I put my coat on the conveyor belt, going through the metal detector, just like half asleep, what is happening there. Stop! 3 armed officers pointing their automatic weapon at me, and I think they are going to shoot me. Do you speak English? Yes. Put your arms up and don't move. I did what they asked for. I'm still trying to make sense what is happening, and from the corner of my eye, I found out the X-ray screening agent removed something from my coat pocket. It was a box cutter knife. It was my box cutter. But they are not looking at that. They are interested in something else in my front pocket. And they're pointing at me. They're pointing to a book inside my pocket. And they ask me, what is that book inside your pocket? Slowly remove with one hand. And then I started to understand what's happening. 5 years after 9/11, I'm at Logan Airport. They just found out a box cutter in my coat pocket, and they're thinking there is a religious book in my front pocket, and I may be a terrorist. I slowly removed the book from my pocket. It was a Dunkin' Donut coupon book I just found out for me. Half of them started laughing, the tension punctured, but they still continued to search me. They looked at it everywhere, they looked at my documents, everything. For almost after 1 hour, they handed me over to Massachusetts State Police for further questioning. So the state trooper started doing background check on me. He started asking me the question about where do I live, where do I work, where I came from. And I was really afraid what other questions he might ask. And I was praying to God, please God, don't let him ask me this one question. Why the box cutter knife was in your pocket? Because tell you the truth, I'm not exactly proud to tell the true story. The true story is, just the day before earlier, I was putting mulch in my garden. I had opened the box of mulch with a box cutter knife, put the box cutter in my pocket, and totally forgot about that. But I couldn't tell him that, because then he will ask, you're right, this is New England, and who puts mulch in their garden in December? Can you even buy mulch in December? But I couldn't tell him that because I'm not exactly proud of that part of the story. I got the mulch in June, procrastinated for 6 months, and then December, I realized that when the whole mulch will be wasted if snow falls, and that mulch was very important to me. But I couldn't tell him that because he would ask why that mulch was so important to you and how much it cost anyway. Well, I couldn't tell him that because I got the mulch for free. I love everything that is free, and I got this mulch, and you know that one, because it did not have any price on that, it was priceless to me. But I couldn't tell him that because then he would ask me, where did you get a free bag of mulch? Let us say, I'm not exactly proud to tell you that part of the story. I got the free bag of mulch after a verbal fight with a store manager. But I couldn't tell him that because then he would ask, why you have to fight with a store manager to get a box of mulch? And I'm not exactly proud of that part of the story too. You know, I had a coupon that said you could get a free bag of mulch, and I tried to take it to the cashier, but the cashier refused to accept it because it was showing the coupon expired into the system. So I went to the store manager. He also refused. And then I told him, legally, the coupon does not have the printed expiry date, so it is still valid. And then I threatened him that I'm going to make a complaint to Massachusetts Department of Consumer Affairs, and so he finally gave me the box of mulch. But couldn't tell him that as well. Because then he will ask me, where did you get that coupon? Where it gives you free box mulch? I'm not exactly proud to tell that story. I found that coupon in the parking lot. It wasn't mine. While all this backstory was going in my head, I was praying to this thing, God, okay, something miracle happens, and the state trooper was putting out all this document and everything like that. Fortunately, suddenly, his walkie-talkie rang, and he had to go somewhere else in the Logan airport. He has already got my information. The TSA has already cleared me, so they let me go. Since that day, I definitely have realized I'm alive today because of the professionalism of TSA agent. I owe my life to them. They have a very difficult task to do. I still collect coupons, sometimes useless, sometimes priceless. I still procrastinate, but these days I make sure that I finish mulching by November. And I still hate early morning flight, but I make sure that when I leave my box cutter at home. Thank you very much.
Ajay Galivale. As I said, that was his first time on our stage. And we do welcome, we love first-timers, people who have something they would love to say and maybe don't have a place they can say it in or a place they can feel safe in which to speak it. We welcome you to apply and to be part of this. In fact, if you will look in your programs, you will see that there is a bookmark. And let me show that to you, you'll see this. And if you look at the back of the bookmark, it will ask, do you have a story to tell? And some of your choices are, of course, yes, I do have a story, please contact me. I don't have a story, but I know someone who does. Or I'm still thinking, could we talk it over? We're very willing to do that with you. So put down your name as well as your phone number and your email. And you can leave this card either with me or any one of our workers, our volunteers. Can you raise your hands, who is ever working with voices? You'll see some folks in the back and around. And please, just make sure we get it, and we can contact you about how you can be one of these, one of our people up on the stage. So, music, like many things, depends upon timing, for sure. Even listening to music depends upon timing. And for our next storyteller, getting to listen to the biggest musical event of the 60s took the most timing of all. Our next storyteller has lived in Lexington for 43 years. He founded Aligned Visions in Chelmsford, and he has told stories informally, but it is his first time telling it to us tonight. So if you would be so kind as to welcome Mr. Bob Coyne to the stage.
It was the summer of 1969, and 6 of us were going to a music festival. My cousin Chris had secured the use of the family's brand new Buick Electra, and that's the car we were taking to the festival. Then it turned out Chris had to work Friday night till 11 o'clock, and he couldn't get out of it. But no sweat. We'll just drive through the night, miss the early music acts, and there'll be plenty more music after that. By 11:30, we had the Buick loaded with sleeping bags, a large cooler of ice, beer, bread, and bologna, and we were on our way to Woodstock. But we hadn't gone far before the radio began reporting on the conditions there. Heavy rain and huge crowds, far more people than expected. There wasn't enough food, and there were inadequate facilities. And then an ominous voice on the radio warned, if you're on your way to Woodstock, you may as well turn around, because you just can't get there. So, of course, we kept going. As the sun came up, traffic slowed to a standstill, and we were still 13 miles away. The roads completely gridlocked. We hung out and partied with our fellow travelers, and as Saturday began to disappear, we began to despair of ever making it to the concert site. The only place we could go with a car was back in the direction we came. We headed out as darkness set in, but didn't give up, finding a small country road that looked promising on the map. But when we got to within about 4 miles of the stage, there was a state trooper with his lights flashing parked across the road. We backtracked a 1/4 mile and took one last look at the map. In the darkness, we could actually see our destination off in the distance. The lights from the stage lit up the sky. Then we saw it, a gate to a farm field. As farm kids, we knew that all fenced-in fields had gates for access by tractors and other farm equipment, and more gates for accessing adjoining fields. We opened the gate and drove through. Chris turned the car lights off, lest we attract the attention of a farmer with a shotgun. I sat on the hood of the car and opened each new gate we approached. Chris drove through, and Jimmy Murphy hopped off the trunk and closed them. We angled our way through Max Yasgur's fields, following the light in the sky, not bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, but bringing our beer, bread, and bologna to the sacred birthplace of Woodstock Nation. We came out on the road close to the stage and found a parking spot. We made it to music Mecca. We were in hippie heaven. Joni Mitchell wrote an iconic song titled Woodstock, which went a long way toward capturing the essence of the event. Part of the last verse in the chorus said, "By the time we got to Woodstock, we were half a million strong, and everywhere there was song and celebration. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." Today, Woodstock is firmly entrenched as part of our nation's cultural history. There were no arrests. A baby was born. Hundreds of thousands of us experiencing less than ideal conditions peacefully helped each other make the most of the largest, most famous music event in history. I've spent some time reflecting on that period and comparing it to today. My generation was involved in creating a great divide in this country over the war in Vietnam. We protested the war in huge demonstrations against our government, bringing condemnation and accusations of being unpatriotic from older generations. Today's young people also have a fight on their hands. They view our inaction on climate change and school shootings and are building their organizations to make a difference in the world. Just as our battle against an unjust war took many years to develop, their numbers joining the front lines will grow larger and larger. And it's critically important that they receive more support from their elders than we sometimes experience with Vietnam. For while they wouldn't choose these words to compare today with the times of 50 years ago, we once again find ourselves in a time when we've got to get ourselves back to the garden.
Bob Coyne. And now, when I think about what Bob was saying, think about how young I was and was not able to be there. I was probably somewhere just out of utero, but as most of us who are children of the '60s, we grow up with that idea about what it must have been like. Well, Bob, he made it to Woodstock. But curiously, Joni Mitchell, who he spoke about, who wrote the song Woodstock, which so beautifully captured the spirit, was not able to make it. But now, to sing Joni Mitchell's Woodstock, would you please welcome back Dave, Ronnie, and also Chuck, and also bringing up our very own Beth Walsh.
I came upon a child of God. He was walking along the road, and I asked him, "Where are you going?" And this he told me. Said, "I'm going on down to Yasgur's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band. I'm gonna camp out on the land, and I'm gonna try and get my soul free. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." Well, then can I walk beside you? I have come here to lose the smog, and I feel to be a cog in something turning. Well, maybe it is just the time of year, or maybe it's the time of man. I don't know who I am, but you know life is for learning. We are stardust, we are golden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. By the time we got to Woodstock, they were 500,000 strong, and everywhere there was song and celebration. And I dreamed I saw the bombers flying shotgun in the sky. They were turning into butterflies above our nation. We are stardust, billion-year-old carbon. We are golden, caught in the devil's garden, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden.
Beth Walsh. Chuck, Ron, Dave. As a poet, I can't help but love that song. Sometimes there's something when I hear it that melts inside of me when I hear those words. We are stardust. We are golden. Billion-year-old carbon caught in the devil's bargain, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. That song takes us profoundly from the personal to the global, especially now at this time when we find that we are in crisis, a crisis of timing to save our garden. Our next speaker this evening will give us his perspective on this. Barb Armstrong, he directs the MIT's Energy Initiative, which links science, technology, and policy to transform the world energy systems. He is a chemical engineer, so he knows exactly what we're all made of. And he is a longtime Lexingtonian. Will you please put your hands together and welcome Bob Armstrong.
So as you just heard in the song, we're all made of carbon. I don't know so much about stardust, but I do know about carbon. The Earth has been recycling carbon since life began on the planet, and we're part of that carbon cycle. So carbon is not a problem. We owe ourselves to that, plants, animals, our food chain. But we do have a reliance on carbon that has developed dramatically over the centuries. In the late 1700s, as the Industrial Revolution began, we started to depend more on carbon systems for our economic progress and well-being. First, we depended on wood and hydropower for powering machines to help replace manual and animal labor in producing goods and services. First with wood, as I mentioned in England, England used wood until basically they stripped England of all the trees, and then they turned to coal, which provided a more readily mined substitute. It was more energy dense and also more reliable in the sense that the water content and moisture was more reliable. And so coal started to replace wood quickly as a substitute for energy in powering machines. But later that got displaced by oil. Convenience of oil was evident, particularly in shipping and transportation applications. Gas later began to replace oil in many applications. So we see a series of energy transitions that take substantial time. Each of those energy transitions took about 70 years in time to make a transition from one major energy source to another. All of those resources, the wood, the coal, oil, gas, those were all plant-based, at least recently or in the distant past. And we're burning them, and presumably they'd recycle again. And so a question that comes to mind is, what could go wrong in that picture, right? And the answer is scale, right? It's something that I'd like you to take away from this, is that in early chemistry, chemical engineering, looking at fossil fuel combustion, you'll look at the products, the byproducts or end products of combusting those fossil fuels. What you get back are CO2 and water. And both CO2 and water are already in the atmosphere, so you say, what's the problem? And again, the problem is scale. If I could have the first slide, maybe it's up there already. Okay, here's the first slide, looks at the measurements of CO2 on top of Mauna Loa, going back to the late 50s, around 1960, is when NOAA got involved in those measurements. And you can see the steady increase in CO2 over time as we began to swamp the Earth's ability to recycle all of the CO2 that we were emitting associated with the growth of our global energy system. And you see the steady rise in that CO2 with an inset blown up to show you what's happened in very recent years. In particular, in 2016, we passed a somewhat dubious milestone of surpassing 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere over an entire year. And we continue to grow from that. In recent years, we've been between 410 and 415 parts per million. So what does that have to do with global warming? If you look at the climate science, the estimates of warming associated with increases in greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, 450 parts per million of CO2 equivalents is generally considered as the benchmark for a 2-degree rise in temperature, 2 degrees centigrade, relative to pre-industrial levels. Okay? As you can see, we're converging on 450 pretty soon, and if you take a printout of this and draw a straight line extrapolating the growth and intersect that with 450, you come up with about 2037 or 2038. So that's 17, 18 years from now. Compare that with 70 years for a typical energy transition, and you can see the time is now to get going and to get going really fast on this. That's 2 degrees. If you go back to the Paris Accord, the goal was 2 degrees or preferably something closer to 1.5. Well, 1.5 is nominally around 430 parts per million. That would be 7 or 8 years from now. So that would be an impossible thing to do, and we need to think not only about how we're going to address this emissions problem, but how do we get back ultimately as we go down the road. So that brings us in the next slide to the challenge that's in front of us, which is a dual energy climate challenge. It's dual in the sense that on the one hand, we expect a doubling of energy demand as we get out towards end of century, driven by the fact that population continues to grow globally, and the standard of living of the population we have continues to grow. That standard of living increase is important because people in developing countries are entitled to the kind of resources and quality of life that we have. But at the same time, the second part of this challenge is we have got to mitigate climate change by addressing the emissions problems we have. Right? And I'd like to stress the emissions part of that. I'm not going after carbon per se. It's that we emit CO2 from those processes that causes the problem with climate change. So if I can go on 2 slides, there we go. One of the challenges with addressing climate change, with mitigating climate change, is how embedded emissions are in our economy. The idea in this picture is to get you to think a little bit about where all these emissions come from. So as you look at this picture, try to identify places you see as emission sources. There's some easy ones in there, right? You see all the lights lit up. That requires electricity. So power is clearly one of those sectors that we've been focusing on for reducing emissions. You see, I think it's a taxi on the road there. So transportation is another area where we're clearly focused on reducing emissions. But there are emissions embedded in other places. You see a food store, or some people would call that a food store, where it does advertise salads there, so you can have a salad if you want. The food system we have consumes a lot of energy, and it emits a lot of CO2. We know that, and so that's another contributor buried in our economy and our lifestyles. The buildings that are there have embedded CO2. They're made of concrete and steel. There's emissions associated with those, or emissions associated with heating and cooling the building. So that picture captures the idea that throughout our economy, throughout our lives, we are consuming energy and there are associated CO2 emissions with that right now are too high, and we have to eliminate all of those. The next slide introduces an aspect of that emission system that I'd like to use as an example here, which is transportation. So I'm going to pull an example out of light-duty vehicles, so the kinds of cars that we drive, and what the emissions profiles are for those vehicles. And I'd like to look at what happens if you have different drivetrains. As you consider buying a car, what would be the emissions impact of different choices you might make. And particularly right now, since President's Day weekend is coming up, and that's a good car sales time, if you're thinking about buying a car, pay attention. All right, so we're going to look at 5 cars. We picked 5 cars here. These are, 2 of them are Toyotas, 3 of them are Hondas. And I'm not selling either one of those. I have no stock in a car company. We picked those because they all have about the same internal volume. They're roughly 115 cubic feet internal volume, so they're similar sized cars. The main difference across these vehicles is the drivetrain. The one on the far left is a Toyota Camry. It's the kind of car we used to have. It's a gasoline engine car. The other Toyota is a hybrid Toyota Camry. It's the kind of car that we drive now. Gets twice the mileage that the old spark ignition engine got. Then the Hondas cover a plug-in hybrid, a battery electric vehicle, and a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Now, I don't know how many of you are shopping for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. There are only 4 fueling stations in Massachusetts right now, so you might want to put that one off. Next slide looks at the emissions profiles, how we're going to rack up emissions on these vehicles. And I've just picked the one to show what the profile is going to be made up of. The vehicle on the far left we're going to be looking at is the hybrid, is the Toyota Camry that has a gasoline engine. So that's labeled here as an ICE. That's an internal combustion engine vehicle. There is a stacked bar that captures the emissions, and that's in 3 parts. The top part of that is the emissions you probably normally associate with driving. That is the emissions produced by burning the fuel to move you along down the road, or even just to sit still in a traffic jam. The middle block, the light blue block, is the emissions associated with making the fuel. Right? So the gasoline you burn has an emissions profile associated with that goes all the way back to drilling for oil, producing the oil, transporting the oil, refining the oil, distributing the oil to the pump, and then you put it in your vehicle. So there's an emissions associated with all of those steps. And then the last piece, the green piece at the bottom, is the emissions associated with actually making the vehicle. So there's steel in the vehicle, there's plastic, there's glass, there are electronics components. So lots of different things have to be made. Those all have carbon footprints associated with them. So the next slide shows the comparison of these vehicles. And there's a number on the top of each of these bars, which is the relative emissions in grams of CO2 equivalent per mile traveled relative to the hybrid vehicle. All right, so the hybrid vehicles, the second one from the left, that is a 1 on top. The spark ignition engine, the ICE gasoline engine, is about 1.37 times the emissions of that. What's interesting is if you look to the right, the plug-in hybrid and the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle have roughly the same emissions profile as the hybrid Camry vehicle. All right. The one that's best in this graph is the battery electric vehicle, and that is about 0.75, about 3/4 of the hybrid vehicle. Now, what may be interesting to you is that as you look over towards the far right, the 2 vehicles that you would expect to have no emissions do have emissions, right? So the battery electric vehicle and the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle have emissions, none associated with burning the fuel, right? If you use the electricity to drive your battery electric vehicle, there are no emissions there. But there were emissions to produce the fuel, the electricity. And how you produce that electricity makes a difference. What we've used in this picture is the US grid average carbon intensity for the grid. For the hydrogen fuel vehicle, you have to make the hydrogen fuel. What we assume there is that you do it the way we do most of the hydrogen production in the world today. That's steam methane reforming. You strip it off of methane, and you don't sequester the CO2. All right? and it's still about the same as a hybrid vehicle. So this last slide shows what's the impact of how you make the electricity. So this looks at the carbon intensity of the electric grid across the U.S. This is a fairly coarse picture. You can do this on a very local level if you want, but looks at the difference in carbon intensity across the U.S. and the impact of that on a battery electric vehicle relative to a hybrid electric vehicle. And you can see that there are parts of the country like the Northwest, which are highly dependent on hydropower for their electricity grid, very clean grid. So the battery electric vehicle looks very good compared to a hybrid electric vehicle. In a state like West Virginia that's very dependent on coal, you look worse than a hybrid electric vehicle, right? So where you are depends on what the choice is that you should make if you want to minimize emissions. I'd also like to say that in this slide that before we feel too good about being up in the Northeast where it's pretty green, Massachusetts is the worst electric grid intensity of all the New England states. I also like to say that I don't think this means we're better people than others. I think what this shows is something about the heterogeneous energy resources we have around the U.S. There's a lot of coal in West Virginia, so they use it. A lot of hydro resource in the Northwest, so it gets used. The same story plays out globally. What's available globally in different countries varies on where you are. And I think one of our big concerns as we race to address climate change is how do we deal with countries like India and China, which have vast coal resources? How do we help them to get to an energy system that meets the needs of their people, but doesn't emit anything like the carbon we have emitted over our history? The story also tells you something about some of the good news in the U.S. Although we sometimes think that we're not doing much to address climate change, in these different parts of the country, there are different experiments going on at the state and regional level to see how we can transform our energy systems. California has one, New York has a program, the New England states, RGGI, is one of the programs. So there are a lot of experiments going on that we think can inform us as we move, hopefully soon, to national and to global policy. The other thing I'd like to say that I think is hopeful for our future is that we have some very active young people and local people working to bring the urgency of climate change to our attention. I'd like to highlight two of the groups that we're focusing on here tonight and are partnering with us here. One is the Global Warming Action Coalition, the Lexington chapter, and the other is the Lexington chapter of the Sunrise Movement. So I'd like to acknowledge both of those groups. Thank you very much.
Before we continue, I'd like to take time to give you a note from Cheryl Meadow, who will be our first storyteller after the intermission. Cheryl would like you to know that her remarks will reference experiences with sexual abuse. She's decided to talk about this tonight to begin the conversation and to start to normalize it. This is a very difficult topic for many, especially for survivors and their loved ones. So she asks that you please take care of yourselves during and after her reflections, and that she, as do we here at Voices on the Green, honor anyone's need or desire to take a walk now or at any point during her remarks. In fact, Cheryl says she may take that walk with you. But again, as the words I mentioned at the top of the event says, there is a time to break down, a time to build, and a time to heal. And that is what we are about here at Voices on the Green, healing, whether it is the way speaking the truth of our experiences heals or listening to the truth of someone else's experience heals us. We know that these things must get done, they must be healed, and we also speak to those who see something that must be done in this world and says, I plan on being a healing agent instead of a disease. and I want to heal that while there is still time. Here at Voices on the Green, we feel it's important to support those we see doing good in our community and in the world. To that end, we partner with organizations we feel exhibit those values. I feel fortunate tonight that we have not just one partner, but two. To introduce them is the Director of Voices on the Green, Mr. David Rose.
I think I will be incredibly brief because I think Bob set the story perfectly, and Reggie as well. Part of our mission at Voices on the Green is to reach out into the community, and one of those clear missions is to recognize and support organizations that live out our values, the values we talk about here in this church. We're looking for organizations that we can recognize and support as part of that mission, because that partnering is what I think can benefit our whole community. So given what we knew Bob's talk would be about in this evening, we approached our own climate action team here at First Parish Church. It's a great group, and they're looking at internally, how can we make this building a better building for all the emissions that Bob was talking about? How can we, and we're about to enter a capital campaign, and part of that will be to, how can we make a building that is in fact better for the whole environment? And we asked them, who should we recognize in our local community? And they mentioned the two organizations that Bob also mentioned. And so we are here to do that here, just briefly to say thank you to them for the work they've already done, and your being here and paying for the tickets will help to support their work going forward. So I'm going to ask the two groups to come up. First, the senior organization that's been here for a long time and was into this fight long before a lot of us thought it was even an important one. And Ricky will talk a little bit about the Global Warming Action Coalition.
Hi. When Bob Quall and David Rose reached out to GWAC to see whether we wanted to partner on this event, at first I was intrigued, and then they said the name of the event was The Timing is Everything, and then I smiled. I said, oh yes, that is a connection that is critical, and the time is now. So we deeply appreciate being asked to partner with you tonight. So I'm calling for everybody in the audience, raise your hand or stand if you are a GWAC member, or we call them GWACers. If you are a GWACer, you know a GWACer, or you've been a GWACer in the past. Can you raise your hand? Okay, have you been to any of our movies? Everybody keep your hands up. Our movies, our speakers, our panels, our environmental group that we did a thing for people running for the State House. No? So did any of you join the students for the climate strike over at the high school? Aha, there we go. Action-oriented. We're really excited to share tonight with Sunrise. These are a group of students that are passionate, they are determined, and I believe they will be successful because of it. We all need to, as Bob said, is to have their backs and to work with them because this is important. GWAC supports all of their efforts. So our mission is to educate, raise awareness, promote actions, and to safeguard the health of our planet. What we decided is to use all of the funds that we raised tonight to donate to the library to curate a climate change group of books and movies, any other things. All of that money will go straight to the library. I spoke with Corinne Stembridge, the library's director, and I told her about this idea, and she was very excited. She said climate change is one of the topics they get asked about. So she's excited about getting more and more books that you can give people, and she wants to put a list together that when people ask that, how can I learn more about climate change, she will hand them this list. So we're also excited, and you can look forward to, we'll have a display in the library sometime in the next few months as we go through this, and we'll try to concentrate on the current science, solutions, and sustainability of our project. We think at GWAC that there are many opportunities for people, individuals, to be a part of the solution and to make a difference. If you visit the display in the back where we have our posters on GWAC, you'll find a couple of handouts on things you can do at home, things you can make decisions about. Every time we decide on something, we are making a decision, and in that decision may be the moment when you do something about climate change. So we look forward to collaborating with many groups or many individuals on future projects, and thank you again, Voices on the Green, for having us here tonight.
And I don't think I need to introduce them anymore. You've gotten some great introductions by better people than me. So Kavish and Anya from Sunrise Lexington.
Hello, my name is Anya Rao, and I am the Actions and Campaign Lead for Sunrise. Sunrise is an army of young people who want to stop climate change and create many jobs in the process. We are ending the corrupting influence of fossil fuel executives on our politics and trying to elect leaders who stand up for the health and well-being of all people. We are scared for our future and the safety of our planet. And we would love to tell you more about all the work that we've done in the past and all the work we have planned for the future. Come visit us at the table to see how you can help Sunrise succeed and achieve its goals.
Hello, my name is Kavish Pathak, and I am the co-founder and coordinator for Sunrise Lexington. I am honored to be speaking here tonight, especially because a year ago from today, Senator Ed Markey and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez released the Green New Deal. This year in town meeting, there will be a climate emergency declaration on the agenda. This declaration is a resolution saying that our town will be net zero by 2035. To read it, go on our website, sunriselexington.org. We are also announcing that we are launching a No Fossil Fuel Money campaign. We demand that all people running for office from local to federal levels sign this pledge. To learn more about us, please go on sunriselexington.org and come to our table at intermission. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thanks to our partners for all the good they're doing. In a minute, we'll be coming up on intermission. I want you, if you feel so inclined, to please chat with our partners and find out what they're doing, what you might be able to do to help. When you go out, you can bring the drinks that you buy back in here. We hope that you will purchase drinks that will also help to go to help our partners do their work. And as you walk through those doors during intermission, you will see a lot of food. It is free. That's right, it is free. Have at it. You will see chocolate-covered strawberries. Go for it. It's been provided to us tonight by FoodLink, who's an organization out of Arlington that rescues fresh food, alleviates hunger, and contributes to environmental sustainability, which also helps to heal our earth. And what we hear at this First Paris likes to call our Blue Boat Home. Blue Boat Home is a beloved song, and many of you out there will know it. So please, I welcome back to the stage Ron, Dave, and Chuck to sing us out. After they sing, we will go to intermission right through these doors over here. And if you know this song, and I know many of you do, please sing along with us. And those of you who don't, you will see that the words are written on the screen behind me. Please welcome back our musicians.
Below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sailing moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, casting questions. Ooh, where am I? Here we go. Give thanks to the waves upholding me, and the great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. This wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Ocean of earth is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat.
Chuck Clow, Ron Hirschberg, Dave Moore, please have food, have drink, bring your drink back into the sanctuary, enjoy yourselves. We'll be back in 10 minutes. David Moore. Welcome back to Voices on the Green. Tonight, for those of you who might have just wandered in, our theme is Timing is Everything. We mix stories and speaking, public speaking about subjects which are important, as well as music. And tonight, it has been truly, truly a blessing to hear so much of what is going on, and to have our musicians, and to have Beth Walsh, who is still here with us. Thank you for everything that you gave us. Give Beth a hand, please. Before I introduce our first speaker, first storyteller of the second half, I'd just like to make you aware of something which is happening here tomorrow night, here at 7:30. You can come hear something called How Bach Weaves His Magic. It's a concert and discussion. Jenny Sterling, who's a violist with Handel Haydn Society, and George Larrivee, who's a pianist, will perform Johann Sebastian Bach's Sonata for Viola da Gamba. They will perform that on viola and piano. And after that, a discussion about what Bach does to breathe life into music and to shape the listener's emotional experience will happen after that. So if you're as much of a geek about this kind of stuff as I am, you have a place where you can come and geek out. Cheryl Meadow is an active community volunteer. I mean, for real, like active. She and Meryl, her lovable squeeze toy of a spouse, have founded Monroe Saturday Nights, which is a performance arts series here in Lexington. Cheryl is she really is. So basically anything that you really see that's worth anything doing in Lexington that's for the community, for our town, you can bet that Cheryl has had something to do with it. To that end, I want to introduce you to a very special individual. Will you please give a rousing Voices on the Green welcome to Cheryl Meadow.
Thank you. Good evening. When I was planning for tonight, I thought of a great opening that went something like this. Never in my wildest dreams did I believe I would ever say, I'm grateful for Donald Trump. But it would always get stuck in my throat. Having organized a cocktail party in 1986 in Manhattan, which Mr. Trump attended, I had personal experience with him, and I knew what an unkind and coarse man he was. But that's a story for another time. The point is that without his pussy-grabbing rhetoric 30 years later, I would not have been severely triggered as many survivors of sexual abuse were. The time was finally right to forgive the unforgivable and find peace. My story is difficult to share. It's only the second time I've spoken publicly about it, and I do feel a bit vulnerable tonight, so if I get forgive me. But as Reggie said, I want to normalize the conversation surrounding sexual assault. So here I am, and here we go. My father sexually abused me as a child and continued to sexually harass me throughout his life. As a preteen, I tried to tell my mother and sisters about the abuse, but shockingly, they didn't believe me, and they wouldn't discuss it anymore. It was pretty harrowing. It injured me almost as much as his behavior, and their response sowed the seeds of doubt of my judgment that I cultivated for much of my life. So, I left home at 17, and at 19, I began my healing journey. Decades of therapy helped me to come to grips with the adverse effects that the trauma caused. I'm shaking. Therapy was hard, painful, and really powerful. I overcame my debilitating shyness, which may come as a surprise to some of those who know me now. I radically improved my self-esteem, and I put to rest much of my anguish, guilt, and shame. But I was still bitter after all these years. I didn't think I could ever forgive my family for what had happened to me. So how do you forgive? I had no idea until I met a woman whom I'll call Maya in 2017. She shared similar childhood experiences as I did, and she also suffered from post-traumatic stress that I did, which included bouts of depression, anxiety, and flashbacks. But Maya was peaceful and balanced, in part because she forgave her family. She suggested that I'd begin to fully heal when I forgave my family with love. With love? I thought she was nuts. Honestly, I grew up in an abusive home where no one had my back, and love just didn't flourish there for me. But I wanted and deserved the kind of peace and balance that Maya had, so I listened and I went to work. Ultimately, I opened my heart, and I found love in the form of empathy and gratitude. Empathy grew out of a year of dedicated effort, culminating in an appreciation of my family's life struggles. Through this process, I found shared experiences and love for their humanity. I began by looking at my family more objectively to try to understand the nature of their pain. Beyond his sexual assaults, my father was also verbally and physically abusive. What happened to him? Why did he behave this way? As he died in 1988, I needed to do some research on my own. I discovered that he was beaten by his father growing up. The abused became the abuser. He needed to feel powerful because he felt powerless. Without condoning his behavior, I began to find some understanding for it. My mom and her parents fled the Holocaust when she was 6. They rarely spoke about their escape. As she too was deceased, I tried to walk in her shoes. I imagined how terrifying it must be to flee Germany and arrive in the US as an immigrant as a little kid. She left behind everything, most painfully, her beloved grandmother, who fled to Palestine with their extended family. As a child, she too held feelings of powerlessness, fear, and uncertainty, because when living in Frankfurt, the brown-shirted thugs would smack her in the face almost daily, and she wondered what she did to deserve it. As an adult, she suffered from anxiety and depression. While our situations were extremely different, we shared many of the same fears and emotions. I accepted that she was just too fragile to acknowledge my father's sexual crimes and would not give up her false sense of refuge. My sister's disbelief really stumped and angered me. Did we not grow up in the same dysfunctional house? It took a lot of time, but I came to understand that denial was their survival mode. Believing me meant their dad, whom they worshipped even as he hit and cursed them, was a pedophile. I acknowledged that they too were traumatized and that they did their best to keep their heads above water. We'd all shared grim experiences. I gradually began to feel compassion for them, allowing my resentment to dissolve. And this was really important. You can't forgive if you carry resentment. But finding gratitude was tough. All I could see was their unforgivable behavior and the major damage I sustained. I felt really stuck. I began to read more about the practice of gratitude. I kept a gratitude journal and spun my wheels for quite some time. I was feeling really frustrated, and I was about to give up. But then I came upon a quote from Christy Nelson, the executive director of the Network for Grateful Living. She writes, "Gratefulness is a touchstone, offering us what we need, not simply to survive difficult times, but to appreciate them for their exquisite complexity, buried blessings, rich opportunities, and deep teachings." With this frame of reference, I realized I had a lot to be grateful for. I'd seen the belly of the beast and emerged strong, brave, resilient, and kind. I was damaged, but not broken. I continued to reframe my negative experiences into positive results, and it was cathartic. So, here's what I decided forgiveness is and is not for me. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It evolves over time, and it's not linear. And I'm guessing it doesn't end. The journey to forgiveness begins with my mind and continues through my heart. Making the decision to forgive was the first hard step. The rest was simple, but not easy. Empathy and gratitude, plus grit, helped me to push through the negative emotions, doubts, fears, and resentments. Forgiving does not mean condoning or excusing offenses, nor is it the same as reconciling, because forgiveness is for me, period. To give me peace of mind, to free me from corrosive anger, and to allow me to live more in the moment. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I could find forgiveness for my family or some gratitude for Donald Trump. But 2 years ago, at the age of 59, I found both. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Cheryl for trusting us enough to share that story with us, for letting us share in your healing. Cheryl painted for us a portrait of a woman who found a place and the right time in which she could heal and be whole. And now here to sing and play for us a song that touches on that. A song entitled, an original called All I Have Is Time. Will you please welcome back Chuck Clow, Ronnie Hirschberg, and Dave Moore.
Stubs out her last cigarette. She says, I don't wanna die just yet. Got a life to live, and these kids, you know, too far in just to let it go. And all she wants is some peace of mind, and all I have is time. She turns to walk an empty path. Says sometimes I just gotta laugh. It's like I'm living in a photograph that's lost in time and torn in half. And all she wants is some peace of mind, and all I have is time. And 3 years on, she's still living the same way. It's so funny how life wouldn't change for love again. Oh, 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 oh. says I gotta stand and breathe and take it all from the mountaintop. Buy myself that final shot. And all she wants is some peace of mind. And all I have is time. Taking days away. It's the time. Leave so much to say. It's the time. Time makes a lazy play. It's the time. Days to fill the day. Well, I'm hanging around for days on end. We're crying, pleading to her friends. They wanna help, but in the end, it's your next step to start again. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Love that song. Our next storyteller is a principal program manager at Microsoft and is currently working on Office 365 Cloud, so when it crashes, you know who to talk to. He is the founder of Esprit de Corps, made it through the French, which is an all-French horn ensemble. Will you please welcome to the stage Eric Svensson.
All right, that's a weird way to start a story, but this is going to make sense, trust me. So as a musician, I know that coming in at the right moment is essential, right guys? And I learned this the hard way some years ago. Now I'm the kind of person, some people know, that I'm obsessive about getting places on time, even early. Take an example for tonight. David said, get here around 5:30, 5:45. I was here at 5:15. Sound check, let's go. And I checked the email when we were supposed to be here. I checked it 3 times, made sure I had my horn, made sure I had everything. I'm kind of obsessive about it. But it wasn't always that way. Something happened some time ago. So I'm going to take you back a little bit. It's the mid-90s. I'm living in Seattle, just started working at Microsoft, got a young family, young daughter, young son. And I'm playing in a nice community orchestra, good community orchestra. And it's a community orchestra where we play 2 concerts for every, for every program. And in this particular one, I got to play first horn on this one. Nice. So I'm getting ready for the concert, get dressed, get my music, check the time. And I start driving out to the venue. It's a Sunday afternoon, so the traffic's light. I get to the venue, it's a high school. Parking lot's empty. That's a little weird. But I'm an hour early because I like to get places on time, so no big deal. I can relax, warm up, no problem. 10 minutes goes by. 15 minutes goes by. Nobody's here. It's a little weird. I'm like, what do I do? Well, for the youth in the audience, this is the day before the internet. I know I can't believe that there might have been a time before the internet, but there's a time before the internet, no cell phones, no internet, I don't have anybody to contact. The only thing I had was a concert poster in the trunk. So I go and check the poster. No. You ever have those moments? No. Where time just sort of tunnel visions in? Yeah. Wrong venue. We're playing at that high school next Sunday. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Time check, 1:25. Distance to the venue, I don't know. I don't have the internet. I don't have a phone, but it's probably about 35, 40 miles. Easily 40 minutes. There's no way I'm going to make it. I'm going to have to go home, call the conductor the next day and just fall on my sword, say, I'm sorry, I just screwed up. Now, if you could show the slide. This is maybe a little bit hard to read, but I'm going to just give you a quick music lesson, because this was decision time. Go home or go on. This is the first page of Carl Maria von Weber's Oberon Overture. You don't have to be a musician to notice one important thing. The very first measure, nobody's playing. That circled bit, that's the French horn. Yeah, my part. That's what's starting the concert. So I'm like, I can't go home. I've got to go for it. So I throw the concert poster, I get in the car, and I race eastward on I-90 toward Issaquah, where the concert's being held, bending several traffic rules for sure. No internet, so I don't know where the heck I'm going. I had a little mini map of the concert on the poster. And I get off the interstate, get to the school. Of course, the parking lot is packed. So I got to park way in the back. So I get out of the car, grab my horn, close the door, run to the venue, go back to the car because I forgot my music folder, grab my music folder, and run to and I don't know where to go. So I'm like, I want to find the stage door. I can't find the stage door. I'm looking at the time. It's 2:02. Concert starts at 2 o'clock. Try the first door, it's locked. Try the next door, it's open. I get there, and I'm in the lobby of the back. I open the door, the place is packed. The orchestra is settled. I'm like, there's nothing I could do. I run into the back of the auditorium, I throw down my case, I pick up my horn, and I start racing down the middle aisle just as the conductor starts walking on stage and the orchestra stands up. The conductor and I lock eyes as I'm running down the aisle. Now, if looks could kill, but in this case, if looks could kill and bury me in 20 feet of concrete and turn me to dust, that's the look I got. But I run, and I get up on stage, and I compose myself, and I pick up my horn, and I walk to my seat, and I sit down, and she looks at me. So, to this day, yes, I get places super early. I check tickets, itineraries 3 or 4 times. I don't apologize for it. I know I drive my wife and my family crazy, but if not for that event, I wouldn't have had that psychosis for sure, but I will never, ever have that experience again. Thank you.
Let's hear it again for Eric Svensson. And let's hear it again for Dave and Ron and Chuck.
This is one of my own songs that I notoriously sing wrong, so you guys are going to have a better view of the lyrics than me. This is a whimsical song about it's time-related in that it's kind of about a summer romance that you should have left at the beach when you return for September for all the hard work. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's been 7 times or more you come crashing through my door. We cast our cares aside and we end up on the floor. Morning comes and we're still here. The coffee drowns the taste of beer. Another sunny day, doubts all disappear. Oh no, look what we've become. Oh no, We should have said goodbye before the sun. Now you come stumbling through my door. Well, this routine's become a bore. We've both forgotten what we really came here for. Morning brings another fight. There's no pretending this is right. When all the colors fade out, some bleached out to white. Oh no, look what we've become. Oh no, we should have said goodbye before the sun. Oh no, look what we've become. Oh no, we should have come undone. Summer's gone and left me standing, well, on the shore a washed out landing. 7 times and 7 more I thought of you but closed the door, leading calls and leaving those letters on the floor. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad. It's not the best I ever had. I don't regret it, but I've nothing left to add. Oh no, well, we didn't last that long. Oh no, we couldn't make it, so we shouldn't fake it and waste our time or right it all wrong. Da 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 da. Oh no, look what we've become. Oh no, we couldn't make it, so we shouldn't fake it. We should have said goodbye before the sun. Thank you so much.
David Moore, Lexington's own.
That's right. Well, as Dave said, that last song, it was about a love that went, let's say, beyond its sell-by date. I'm sure by a show of armpits, we can say there's probably a few people, huh? You didn't say it was love. Oh, you're not saying that, okay. But I think we've all had that experience, right? Where it would have been great a week ago, but you know, we just took too much time. We won't leave you on that note, right? We will end our stories with a love story just in time for Valentine's Day. Our last storyteller will speak to us about how much time and persistence it sometimes takes to find a love that lasts. Mia Roop, who, now I gotta introduce you now, who has like the coolest name next to Ache, right? She was raised between, it says, a tennis bra and a ballerina. So her home was really cramped. She works for high-tech sales at Lotus and other places and is married to a very spirited guy and has 2 wonderful children. Now, I know a lot of people think their children are wonderful, but hers really are. I know that. They're really cool people, and they're here to support their mom tonight. So if you will put your hands together, please, for Mia Roop.
So I graduated from Lexington High School in 1980, and I was really excited. And I was on my way to Colby College in Waterville, Maine, and I arrived in the fall at Colby. And I was really into ballet and dance at the time, so I signed up for a bunch of classes, and I was taking ballet. And in January of my freshman year, I started taking a class that was every day. It was ballet every day. And it was a very popular class. There were probably 20 or 30 girls in the class. And one day when I was there, ready to take the class, in walks 5 large football players. And they were in gray sweat pants and gray sweatshirt, and they were there to take the class. And I spotted one of those guys, and I fell instantly in love with him. And I proceeded to tell everyone that I knew that I was in love with this guy. I mean, I told every friend of mine. I told every one of his friends. I told all the guys in my dorm that were trying to get into his fraternity. I told everyone. And then one day, I was walking along a path at Colby, and it was just me. And there he was, just him walking towards me. And it would have been the perfect time to say something, but I just passed him, and I couldn't summon up the courage to say anything to him. And then one day, I was with this group of girls, and we were all eating. We were in the cafeteria, and we were all there. It was not a very popular time to go eat, so we were there by ourselves at this one table, and it was a big cafeteria, and we were just eating carrots and celery because we had all gained a lot of weight. And there in the distance, walking into the cafeteria, is this guy. And he is by himself, and I couldn't go anywhere without a group of people, so I was pretty impressed with that. And then he went and got a tray of food, and I kid you not, he filled it to the brim with food. I mean, it was like packed with food. And he placed himself way over in the distance. There was nobody else between us, and I could see him. And it would have been the perfect time to go and say, introduce myself, but I couldn't summon the courage to do that. And then I found out that there was this party that his fraternity was giving, and I told everyone, every friend of mine, every friend of his, everyone that was in his fraternity, that I wasn't going unless he asked me to that party. But he never asked. So the end of the school year came, and I went home to Lexington, and I was there all summer. And then the next fall, I was really excited to go back to Colby to see this guy. And I continued to tell everybody I was in love with him. And then I walked into my first philosophy class. It was moral philosophy. And there he was, sitting in the back row. There were only 5 rows, and there was only some seats in the front row, so I sat down in the front row right in front of him. And every so often, I would look back and stare at him with these loving eyes. I was just, willing him to ask me out. So during that class, this professor was the most amazing professor, and he said, we are going to read 10 of the most amazing books. I mean, think of the best philosophers in the entire universe. We were reading 10 of these books by 10 philosophers, and we were going to have to write 10 papers. So the next class, I walk in, and he's not there anymore. He withdrew from the class. So very quickly, I learned that he was a second semester senior, and he was going to be graduating in January, and it was October. So I didn't have a lot of time. I only had a few months. So I was going to all of the football games, all of the home games, and my roommate and I, we decided that we were going to go to all the away games, and she had a car, so we'd drive to the away games, and I would position myself right there as the team was running onto the field. You can see they would be running onto the field, and I would be staring at him as he came across. And then at the end of the game, I would be there again, right as they were running off the field, and I would be staring at him, willing him to ask me out. Well, the first weekend in November, they were playing Tufts University, and it was 3 hours away, and we were not going to drive 3 hours to get there. But I knew that most of the guys on the football team were from Massachusetts, and most of them would be staying in Massachusetts for the weekend. But I knew that that guy was going to come back on the bus, and he was going to be there that night. So I asked some friends of mine, some guys in the fraternity, if they would bring me to the fraternity that night. And they said yes, and we walked down. It was kind of dark, and we walked down, and there was this big fraternity house made of brick, and I walked in the door, and it was pretty dark. There weren't a lot of lights on, and there was this one room in the back, and it was the dining room, and there was a bunch of guys in there, and they were playing a drinking game, and I walked in, and there he was. And very shortly after I came, they ended the game, and somehow everybody left except him and me. And we somehow found ourselves facing each other in a door frame, not a very small door frame, kind of a medium-sized door frame, and we were facing each other. And the first thing that I ever said to him was, "I don't even know you, but I'm in love with you, and you're gonna marry me someday." So he said, "Do you want to take a walk?" And I said, "Take me away." And we dated for 5 years, and then he did, in fact, ask me to marry him. And we have been together. In November, it'll be 39 years that we have been together. So this is not the end, because I do want to have a moral to this story. And I was thinking about how to leave this story. And a few years ago, I was at a conference, and I was in a hotel room, and I was standing waiting for the elevator. And there on the elevator buttons, I don't know if you can see it, was a handwritten note that said, "I'm so in love with the man in room 1652. And I realized that that person was in the same situation as me. That person had only a short amount of time and had to profess their love very quickly. So in honor of Valentine's Day, I hope that you all make sure to profess your love to all of your loved ones. Thank you.
Wow. Hopefully you've enjoyed this edition of Voices on the Green. Thank you. Well, the song of our storytellers, I'll end with a poem, and we'll bring some people up here and play us out into the night. When I was, as I like to tell people, suffering from a disease known as my 20s, I used to go to a place to do poetry called Spices, and there was a gentleman in there who was about the age that I am now. And when he came up to me, he said to me, he says, "You know, man, you might make a halfway decent poet if you don't drink yourself to death." Now here I am, all 20s and swagger, right? At that time, couldn't hear anything except how pissed off I was at my, Christian evangelical mother and cop father. But for some reason, this guy kept coming back, right? And he just wouldn't leave me alone. In spite of that twisted up young man I was, it kept trying to get him to go the hell away. He just would not go away. Guess he felt I was worth spending time on. Guess timing is everything. This is a poem of his, which you will never get to hear him do it, because whatever holds this glue, this universe together, has let him go. His name was Kent Foreman. He was a mentor to me. This is his poem about that most diaphanous of dimensions, time. Look, right now, everything is happening. Melodrama. In super cinerama, right now, somewhere, some child has just fallen from some tree. Some philandering husband has misplaced his key to the house and is dreading the anger of his much dreaded spouse. It's 4 a.m. and I want to know where the hell you've been, and I want to know right now. Right now, in some clothesline tenement yard, some drug abuser is in need of a fix. While ladies of the evening bemoan the scarcity of tricks. Hey, times is hard for somebody right now. Because love, somebody's got the blues, lives in a world of deeper, darker hues than grottos tunneled into the bottoms of those Italian aisles. And baby, trials are going on now. At this very second, on any humming highway, any deadly drumming highway, two speeding cars collide head on, while some cunning student of chess decides to forfeit a pawn for a night. Somewhere else, a fight. In an angry hand, a muzzle flashes, enemies guard against each other's border clashings, and blood will flow. Somewhere tonight. Somewhere right now there is a Sears or Walmart which is on fire while it's thronged with shoppers. Somewhere else, some poor sharecropper's mule has just gone lame. Tragedies come in assorted sizes like prizes in some cosmic bingo game. Anywhere, some newborn babe is overheard. Someone hears its indignant crying. And somewhere, in these loneliest of times, someone is dying now. Somewhere, as it happened always, on some stage, some cat was cooking, while ghetto gigolos keep brushing off their clothes, trying to get a little bit better looking for the vixens, fixing to get into something or the other. Somewhere else, chastity is not defended bravely. Somewhere else, some kindred soul is bent over some rusted shovel, digging gravely now. Somewhere right now, somebody is high. Right, Dave? Maybe a couple of somebodies are high. Somebody else is eating a piece of sweet potato pie dig in a pool hall now. Some loser is racking in front of some church. Some poet keeps on yakking now. Right now. Somewhere, some prim, elderly virgin overhears some dirty joke and smiles. And somewhere, someone is listening to the music of a trumpeter named Miles. Every time. All kinds of things are going on at this millisecond or at some ancient dawn. What? How? Oh, dear dreamers, don't you know? There is no other time than now. Than now. Than now. Than now. Than right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We'd like to bring back some people to the stage, so keep that going. There's a lot of people who put this together. Give it up for David Rose, Suzanne Adams, Deb Lapidus, Lisa Marie Steinberg, Sarah Mannix, Amy Jameson, Ann Kodari, Helen Cook, Helen Cohen, David Pollock, Bill Patori, Thomas Clevey, Christopher Padilla, Ruth Rose. We'd also like to bring up to the stage our storytellers, Ajay Gavalale, Bob Coyne, Cheryl Meadow, Eric Svensson, Mia Roop, and Barb Armstrong. And bring back up to their instruments, please, David Moore, Chuck Clow, Ron Hirschberg. And tonight we would like to bring to the stage our minister. And also, yes, we cannot forget the inimitable Beth Walsh to the stage. And also our minister, Ann Mason.
So many words, so much music, so much passion, so much life, so much love that we've heard tonight. This planet is worth saving because we are the humanity that we are. And thank you for showing us the difficulty, the pain, the joy, the sorrow, the passion of who we are as people. This is why we're here tonight. So thank you for bringing your whole selves to this place. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for offering. And let us pledge ourselves to be our whole selves and to work to bring this planet back to where it needs to be, back to the garden. Thank you.